What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over Batman Knightquest. But unfortunately, we have reached a point where Knightquest got a tad bit confusing. And let me explain. So, when it came to Batman Nightfall, DC did an amazing job to make sure that, well, Nightfall was told in a proper order so that fans can actually enjoy it. So you had all the different Bat titles work together to tell the story of Nightfall. Nightquest, not really. You see, Nightquest has a story, but the problem is all the different parts of the stories would come out at once on different weeks. So sometimes you might get part 2, part 9, and part 11, or part 3, part 8, and part 12 in 1 week. And it could get a tad bit confusing because there were a lot of bad titles being used to tell the story of Nightfall. Like, of course, Batman, Detective Comics, Shadow of the Bat, and also like Catwoman, Robin, and the list goes on. And so with all those different books being out there, it kind of got a tad bit confusing to know what is the actual reading order when it comes to Batman Knightquest. And so that is why we're at a point where we have to cover a bunch of one-shot story arcs because it gets a tad bit confusing. And so that is why we're only talking about Batman number 505 for today's video. Now, the opening pages of this book, we actually pick up with Batman doing some detective work. John Paul Valley arrived at a crime scene where an entire family had just been killed off. And the question is right now, who had done it? Now, for John Paul, he can tell it has to be a family member. But before he is actually able to sit down and do some detective work, that is when the system is activated. Now, we had actually talked about the system before. You see, the system is this thing that was put in his mind by his father, the previous Azrael. Let me explain. You see, in John Paul Valley's timeline, he was Azrael before he became Batman. But before he was actually able to pick up the mantle of Azrael, his father was Azrael. But his father knew that sooner or later, one day down the road, his son, John Paul, would have to take up the mantle of the Avenging Angel. Now, once you're in the role of Azrael, you're usually part of the Order of St. Dumas. Now, the actual order, they do their job to kind of follow the order of St. Dumas from the 14th, 15th century. Now, anytime somebody would actually cross the lines with the actual order, they sent out their avenging angel, better known as Azrael. And like I said earlier, before John Paul, it was his father. Now, when his father died, we had learned that he had implanted something called the system in the mind of John Paul Valley. Now, the system is technically used to make sure that if John Paul had become Azrael, he would be ready. The system would teach John Paul all of the moves he needs to know to be a great fighter, but also teach him everything he needs to know about the actual order of St. Dumas. The problem is that now, sometimes with the system, he might see different images or pantheons trying to talk to him. And really, in the earlier chapters of Knightquest, he would have conversations with, well, of course, St. Dumas. But in the opening pages of this book, this time, it is his father. Now, really, it's his father kind of saying, like, you have stepped away from the actual role that you were supposed to be, which was Azrael. But as soon as you took up that mantle, you met Bruce Wayne and tried to live a different life. And now you are trying to take up a different mantle, which is Batman. And son, I don't want that for you. Instead, I want you to take up the actual mantle that I left behind for you, Azrael. But while you have the spirit of his father talking to him, well, that is when he's also being confronted by the spirit of St. Dumas. Now, for St. Dumas, he's saying, listen, I put your son on this new path. I want your son to actually save the Dark City. And of course, he is talking about Gotham City. But for John Paul Valley's father, it's completely wrong. Because to his father, he's kind of like, why would St. Dumas want his avenging angel now being this bad character to save this city that's already falling apart. And so you actually had the two spirits fight against each other for the control and mind of John Paul Valley, where you actually do have the Saint Dumas being able to get rid of spirit of John Paul Valley's father to kind of show him like, no, I am the only true spirit here in your mind, in the system. And right now I'm telling you, I want you to be Batman. Now, with the sirens of police coming towards the crime scene, it wakes up John Paul Valley and he leaves. But now he has to do some detective work to figure out who killed off this entire family. Now, we are introduced to the actual bad guy for today's video, and that'll be a character known as Abattoir. Now, Abattoir is actually a very interesting bad guy who first appeared back in Detective Comics issue number 625 in the year 1991. Now, for Abattoir, his real name is Arnold Etchison. Now, for Arnold, like I said, a very interesting bad guy, this man believed that his entire family was evil. And so he began to go on a killing spree by killing off every single member of his family, his father, mother, wife, kids, or even like uncles and aunts and grandparents. Like he didn't care. If they were his family member, they had to die. And so we're kind of being told here that the entire family we saw earlier that was killed off, that John Paul found, had to be done by him. They were his family and he killed them off. And so now we are able to jump over to John Paul Valley. Now, when we do, we are basically seeing John Paul Valley be a detective. And this is really important for the character when it comes to Nightquest, because for Nightquest, you have John Paul kind of decide that he'll be his own Batman and not try to be how Bruce Wayne was. And really, we kind of saw that when it comes to John Paul, because he wanted to make sure that when he was out there being Batman, he was going to make a statement that the idea that if you were going to be out in Gotham trying to commit a crime, he'll make sure you regret making that crime happen in Gotham City. But then you realize that there are some cases out there you have to be a detective, that the whole idea of brute force is not going to help you solve all the problems you need to solve in Gotham. Sometimes you gotta do detective work. And so you have John Paul being able to figure out who was behind the actual killing of the entire family. And of course, it would be Arnold. Now, for John Paul Valley, he has to remember that the whole idea of Arnold is that he believes that his entire family is evil, which means that he'll go after different family members to kill them off. And so, out of doing some detective work, he realized that Arnold only has like maybe two family members left that he needs to kill off. And the problem is one of them is in jail, but the other one he can actually get to. And that be the son of the cousin who's in jail. And so we kind of find out his name is Graham. And Graham's going to be the next target for Arnold when it comes to him just going around killing off different people in his family. Now, we do learn that Graham is being, introduced at a big time charity event by Leslie Tompkins. And so for John Paul Valley, his goal is to hopefully find Graham in time and to protect him from his own cousin Arnold. Now, the rest of the book is really more of John Paul Valley trying his best to find Graham because he knows that sooner or later Arnold will find Graham and try to kill him. Now, for Graham, we do learn that he's going on a camping trip with a group of kids who are technically orphans. Now, here's the thing. The reason why Graham is doing this for because he is an orphan. Like I said earlier, the other cousin Arnold, Graham's father, is in prison. And the reason why? Because, well, he got his wife killed. And so because of that, it kind of led to Graham becoming an orphan, and he understands what the other kids are actually going through. But either way, while they're heading over to their camping trip, well, that is when they learn that their bus driver is not their usual bus driver, that instead is actually Arnold pretending to be the bus driver to get close to Graham to hopefully kill him off. Now, luckily for Graham, you do have John Paul Valley arrive just in time to actually get on the bus and fight against Arnold. Now, like I said, this is going to be the end of today's video, but it does kind of lead off on a cliffhanger. And the reason why, because like I said earlier, a lot of these books were coming out at the same time, and so it kind of got a tad bit confusing on what is the actual reading order when it comes to Knightquest. But either way, while you have the two characters fight on the bus, John Paul Valley Batman, also Arnold, you have Arnold being able to actually pierce the cape of John Paul Valley. Now, him piercing the cape is going to be very important in later chapters of Knightquest, especially the ending parts of Knightquest. But either way, you do have Arnold being able to get away, and Graham is able to see another day. But for John Paul Valley, he now realized that Arnold got away, which means sooner or later he might pop back up again and might try to come to Graham or possibly another family member. But either way, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.